to relative pronouns. Relative pronouns are a lot of fun. I love relative pronouns, and they provide a lot of fun examples even in English. Relative pronouns are the famous who, whose, and whom. Okay? Who, whose, and whom. So in English, still relatives actually still decline. Who would be your nominative. Whom would be your accusative or direct object or indirect object or object of the preposition. And whose would be our possessive in English. Okay? And they decline as well. And again, for this, you'll have to look at the back of the book. Qui, qui, quod. Masculine, feminine, neuter. All right, but let's do another sentence. Let's say, I was talking to Caesar, blank led the armies in Gaul. Okay, and what we want in the blank would be a relative pronoun. I was talking to Caesar. Well, and here we have to ask that old question in Latin, right? How is the word functioning? Remember our pronoun question. We need to know, 1, the gender, 2, the number, but then we have to ask the case. Okay, in this case, notice here in the main clause versus the relative clause, the one started by a relative pronoun, I was talking to Caesar. In this case, Caesar is the object of the preposition to, or the indirect object. Okay? But as we go to the relative clause, it doesn't matter what Caesar was doing here. It matters what the relative pronoun is doing in its own sentence or in its own clause. Okay? So I was talking to Caesar. Okay, so Caesar, remember what we keep. We keep the gender and the number. Caesar is masculine and he's singular. Okay, that's what we get from our antecedent. That's what we get from the word that the pronoun stands in place of. But then we have to go to the clause the pronoun is actually in to figure out what the word's doing. Okay? Caesar led the armies in Gaul, right? It's the subject, so it would be in the nominative. So now I know I need a masculine, singular, nominative pronoun, and that would be qui. Qui. Okay? Or in English, who. A really fun game to play in English. Actually, it goes 2 ways. One is to see if you can talk this way. So, for example, I was writing with a marker, or I was writing with the markers which were given to me by him. Maybe that's a bad example. I'm trying to think of a good whom one. Okay, here's one that people would often mistake, or sometimes people, they want to get all snooty because they think they know grammar, right? And so we don't like grammar snobs. But anyway, you could say, I was talking to Caesar, whom led the armies in Gaul. And that's like my favorite thing, to see people who are trying to be like snobs by using correct grammar get it wrong. But anyway, one challenge for you is you could actually try to use correct grammar. I, to whom much was given, have much respected, or much expected of me. Sorry, that was a butchered Spider-Man quote. Anyway, so I was talking to Caesar. In this case, it would be who, but in other cases, it would be whom or whose. I, whose classes are full of sleeping students, teach poorly, or something like that. So there I know I need to use whose because it's a possessive. So it's kind of a fun game. See if you can use them correctly, who, whose, and whom in English. But then also you can kind of keep your ears open and eyes open to see people maybe using them incorrectly. You don't have to be mean about it, but it's just kind of a fun game. Okay, so the relative pronouns, those are the ones that introduce relative clauses like this. And they are the English who, whose, and whom. All right. I know, there's a lot to cover. So here are the last 2 groups. I'm going to do intensives first. Intensives are ipse, ipsa, ipsum. Okay, and I came across a really great example of an intensive. What an intensive basically does, if you can even imagine the word intense, like I kind of get intense sometimes when I teach, they add emphasis, they add impact. You know, I mean, it's kind of that court scene, like, it was you! And in this case, in Latin, what it does is kind of doubles down as well. Lets us know who we're talking about. I came across a great one in Livy the other day. And Livy's talking about historians. And he says, you know, some people, a lot of us historians, we say that it was messengers who kind of carried on this debate. But this historian says Syphax himself. And that himself there, in this case, his name Syphax, so it is, oops, misspelled it. Syphax is in the accusative, so it's Syphax, Syphacum ipsum. Syphax himself came and talked. So in that case, it's kind of doubling down. It's intensifying it. It's saying, this is who did it. Tu ipse. You did this yourself. Sometimes we don't translate it. Sometimes it can be really awkward to translate it, but sometimes it has that intensive force. Sometimes it almost has like a passive force, just like ipse, but he did it himself. It doesn't necessarily have to be like, and he did it, but sometimes it is. So it's called the intensive. And again, you can look that up in the back as far as how the declension goes. And that one often will either stand in place of, so it's a true pronoun, it stands in place of, but sometimes, as this example here from Livy shows, sometimes it actually stands with the noun, Syphax himself, So there it gives the intensive force to the noun it works with. Okay? But it is another kind of pronoun. Sometimes it stands in place of, sometimes it stands next to it. Okay? The last group are the demonstratives. Excuse me. The demonstratives. And the main thing for students that I try to have my students see is that the demonstratives have this demonstrative force. That is, you're either pointing at something that's close by, this one here, this guy, or something that's far away, that one over here. Like, well, what toy do you want? I want this one. Versus maybe you're in the wrong aisle. Well, I want that one over there. Okay, so the near demonstrative, just think, right, demonstrate, you're able to point to it. The near demonstratives, as far as masculine, feminine, neuter go, and the nominative singular are hic, hike, hawk. Sounds like football player. Hic, hike, hawk. So masculine, hic, feminine, hike, neuter, hawk. Okay, as far as the declension goes, again, there you'll want to check it out. And it often, just like the intensive, ipse, oftentimes it'll stand right next to it. This man is guilty, hic vir, and you can imagine pointing down like maybe Cataline or something. So hic, it's close, versus ille is kind of interesting. Okay, and so last thing I'm going to talk about is ille. So the near this is kind of straightforward. But ille's got an interesting one. And it's the far demonstrative, that one over there. Not this one, hic, but that one, ille. Now, how this one works, in the basic sense, it works kind of like that. I want that one, or that man. Point out the man who was guilty or whatever. That man. But another kind of tough use, or one that I see my students struggle with, is that ipse has this like reversal effect. Okay, so sometimes what ille does is it takes a previous object and makes it a subject. Okay, so let's say we'll go back to Brutus. Brutus is always doing stuff in Latin class, So Brutus eum occidit. Accidit. Okay, so Brutus killed him. Okay, and here him could be Caesar, right? Now, if we wanted to switch the next sentence's subject to Caesar, who here is the direct object, or it is in the direct object, one of the things I can do is use illa. It flips a previous object into the subject. And so I could say, ille mortuus est. And he is dead. So Brutus killed him, he is dead. Now, I could say Caesar mortuus est. I could do that. But one of the functions of ille is to flip them. Okay, so that's what I decided to do here to illustrate this. What was once an accusative object has now become a nominative subject. So from eum to ille. Okay. Otherwise, it just functions like any other pronoun. Now, I know that's a lot, but there are a lot of pronouns in Latin as in English. So real quick review. The first thing you want to figure out is what is the gender and the number of the noun that it's standing in place of. Or in some instances, the noun it's modifying, that man. Okay, so that's the first thing you want to figure out, your gender and your number. The second thing you need to ask yourself, just like with any noun, and pronouns is a category of nouns, with any noun you have to ask, what's it doing in its clause? So I spoke to him. Okay, you have to say, okay, I know him's masculine, singular, and him in this case would be either an object of the preposition if you want to do ad eum or a. Okay, All right, so I hope that helps and gets you guys ready for your pronoun section.